Good day everyone, it's Shadow back again. Just doing another little tutorial, this time at the request of Lady T from Ted. I'm just going to run through reports, reading them and how to look at the info. So this is a basic attack report, so it's one that I did today. It's a bit of a rushed attack, trying to jump someone while they were hitting a hive. So I wasn't really prepared, so my losses were a bit high. But that's alright. Still won the battle, so that's all that counts. So when you have a look at the report, obviously you got date and time at the top. That's local date and time, so that's not server time. So it's important to note that if you're looking at other people's battle reports, it'll reflect their date and time on the report. It's got location, so that's a link, so you can click that and it'll take you where the battle happened. Resources, this is the resources you stole. In a rally, if you're participating in a rally on a player, that's the resources that you get. That's not the total resources that the rally stole. So that's what you'll get if you were hitting someone. We've got attacker and defender. So this is myself. The locations again of where the battle took place, so where you were sitting and where the target was sitting. Total power. That's your total monarch power. Lost power is how much power you lost. And how much power they lost. Total troops is how many troops you marched versus how many troops they had defending. Survived is how many troops survived, obviously. Wounded, so that's how many troops go to hospital, and that's how many of their troops go to hospital. Killed is how many of your troops died and how many of their troops died. So obviously his hospital capacity filled up, which means that the rest of them went over to killed troops. And then captured. My prison's full at the moment, so I didn't capture any troops. But if your prison's got room, you'll capture troops, and then you can use them for labour or release them for prestige. It's important to note that troops that appear captured on your report appear as killed on the enemy report. So if you capture 2,000 troops, there'll be 2,000 killed troops on their report, which count as captured. And when you release them, they don't go back to the player; they just disappear because they count as dead troops anyway. General. So this is my general that I marched with, name, level, power, and whether they survived, captured, or died. And then the enemy general. So again, name, level, power, and whether they survived, captured, or died. Capturing generals, again, once you're over level 15, you can capture people's generals, and you can also lose your own. They just go into people's prisons, and they can either be released or executed, or you can ransom them. So you don't actually lose them from the game, you do get them back, and people can't steal them from you. Down here you can see I've got some buffs. We'll go into them a bit more later on. So for now we'll just look at subordinate cities. So you can see this player had 500,000 subordinate city power. That's the number of troops in the subordinate cities. How many troops survived? Killed and killing. So killed is how many of the subordinate city troops died, and killing is how many of my troops those subordinate city troops killed. So you can see the ratio there is not very good. He lost a lot more troops than they killed. And then mine, so there's my total troops from my subcities, my subordinate city power there, how many survived, killed and killing. So whereas his 15,000 troops only killed 1,600 of mine, my 88,000 troops killed 40,000 of his, and only 7,500 of them died from subordinate cities. Troop defense, so because he was defending, he's got 60,000 traps. You can see his warehouse level, you can see his walls level, and you can see his archer tower level. After you've attacked, that's not really important information. So that's more stuff that you want to know when you're scouting, so you can sort of see how many resources you can steal, what kind of wall defense they're going to have, and also how big the archer tower is. Archer towers and traps don't really do much, as we'll see later on. They do a little bit, they do help in defending, but you're not going to win a battle just with archer towers and traps alone. Then we move down to the troop buff section, so you can compare basically your technology and your gear and your generals. So from a quick look through his buffs, you can see that he's not very buffed up, which means that his research is probably a little bit low. And also being a WoL general, that's quite low, hasn't got much gear on. So the buffs are quite low because of that. So look, if you look at 1-on-1, so 319 ground troop attack versus 63, so wipe the floor in there. Ground troop defense again higher. Ground troop HP higher. I think most of mine were higher than that one. Looking at this, I can see that he's been working on his mounted troop defense, and mainly all his defense ones, probably because that's where he's at in the science tech tree at the moment. Research tech tree. Defense is one of the first ones that you come up with, so he's quite high in where he is in the research tree. Next one he'll be working on will be attack, and then HP. So in the next few weeks, I'd expect to see those buffs come up. So his attack buffs come up, and then also his HP buffs come up. So that's pretty standard for where the player is at the moment. He's also got some trap research done as well. So you can see there's a little bit of extra bonuses there. So these are my basic buff increases from my research, my general, and my gear. And then we have a few extras as well, which if you look at my other videos, you'll know where they come from. Enemy range troop defense decrease, and enemy siege machine HP decrease. Enemy siege machine defense decrease and range troop decrease. They come from my general Gustavus. So that's his buff, and he is on one of my subsidies. So when we look in a minute, we'll see him on a subsidy, and that's where those debuffs come from. The 4 HP decreases, that's Nero's skill, and again, when we look, we'll see him on a subsidy. If we go up, we've got these buffs up here. So buff to allied troops, turn death to wounded. So that's General Robert Lee's skill. So Robert Lee saved 5,000 of my troops from dying and brought them over to wounded troops. If he didn't do that, so you can see here, 5,009 wounded. So if I didn't have General Robert Lee on, I would have lost close to 14,000 troops in that attack. But because of General Robert Lee, I saved 5,000 of them, which went to my hospital, so I can heal them up and use them again. And then the debuff against enemy troops, turn wounded to death. That's Saladin's skill. So because of Saladin on a subsidy, this player lost an extra 10,000 troops that would have otherwise been wounded. So his hospital wouldn't have been quite full in that case. They would have just gone to. They should have gone to wounded, but because of Saladin, they became killed. So if we go into battle detail, so there's four icons at the top here: survived, killing, killed, and wounded. Survived is how many troops of that type survived the battle. Killing is how many troops that troop type killed. Killed is how many of that troop type died, and wounded is how many of that troop type went to hospital. So if we have a look at my main army, you can see here I attacked with a mix of siege, ranged, and ground troops. I like this kind of attack setup. I find that it works quite well. I don't tend to include cavalry in my attacks unless it's a full 100% cavalry march. Because otherwise I find they die too easily. Same in rallies. I prefer to avoid cavalry in rallies against cities because they charge out in front and they don't have any support and they just die. So unless you're doing a full 100% cavalry march, I would avoid sending cavalry against any PvP and just use a mix of range, siege, and ground. The way that it works is the ground act as a shield with their high defense and high HP. And then the range and the siege do the damage. So if we have a quick look through the numbers here, you can see that from survived, so 57,515 of my ground troops survived, 5,000 got wounded, and 3,000 died. Remembering that this 5,009 came from Robert Lee's skill, so if I didn't have Robert Lee on a subsidy, these 5,000 would be in dead, so this would be 8,514. So that was a nice little save there by Robert Lee. If we have a look at the ratio, I sent close to 70,000 ground troops and they killed 60,000. So it's not quite 1-to-1, but it's a pretty good ratio there of the amount that I sent to the amount they killed. So they did their job basically. Next we got my range troops. So again, I sent 232,381. Sorry, 232,381 survived the attack, and 4,026 died. Of that 232,000, they killed 100,000. So basically every second archer killed someone, or every second ranged troop killed an enemy, which is not great. I would like to see my ranged troops do a bit more damage, get the ratio up to sort of 1-to-1 like the ground troops. That would have been nice to see, but there may not have been enough enemies to be able to bring those stats up, and they may have all died before they could kill anymore. And lastly, my favourite, Siege. A lot of people underrate Siege, but I find that they work quite well when used properly. The main thing that you can see here instantly, the amount that I sent was about 16,000. So you can see here 14,770 survived, and 1,294 got killed. Siege never go to hospital. They always just die. So Siege don't end up as wounded. But if we have a look at the ratio here, so 16,000 of them killed 65,023 enemy troops. So that's like about almost a 5-to-1 ratio there. 5 killed for 1 sent. As a comparison, if this was a 5-to-1 ratio, I would have killed over 1 million troops. So you can see that the Siege there do quite a lot of damage for not sending that much. That's why I like to include them as a sort of a backline long-range attack. Obviously, don't send too many, because the more Siege you send, the less shield you can have from your ground troops, and the less damage dealing you can have from your range. So you don't want to be like an 80% Siege army. But yeah, they are nice to include just to get those few extra kills. I probably sent too few on this attack. I didn't buff, so I didn't have my march capacity up. Otherwise, that would have been sent. I would have sent about 60,000 of those, same as my ground troops. I like to send about 65% ranged, 15 siege, and 20% ground troops in an attack. If we look at our subsidies, you can see here I haven't been clearing out my troops, so they've got troops of all levels. Once I get a bit more growth in the game, I'll go through and I'll clear out my lower levels, just so then there aren't as many sitting there and they make room for the higher tier troops. I'll probably do that once I start reducing about level 8s, just to get rid of all these bottom ones. So generals, I've got Prince Rhaegar on here. He doesn't do much on subs. His skill doesn't carry across. I've just got him there because he was a spare general. If I were to level him up, he'd give good power to the sub, but he wouldn't provide any skills. So I'm leaving him there until I'm sure that I'm not going to get a better general on the sub. Robert Lee, you can see he's got a bit more power there because I've worked on him a little bit, because he is going to be a sub general because his skill carries across. So I'm going to be keeping him on a sub. So I've worked on him a little bit to try and get his power up. And I'll work on him in the future to try and get him up around the 1.5 to 2 mil mark, and then he should be a fairly decent general then on the sub. Again, subsidy troops, still got all the low tiers. I've got to go through and clear them out. Next one's Saladin. Again, nice, decent power for this size, for this stage. Sorry. His skill carries across, so he's also going to be staying on a sub, which is why I've worked on him. Washington, his power I've worked on because he's my monster killing general. So I've just finished almost finished doing my main Rhaegar, and then I'm going to be working on Washington, getting his cavalry gear and getting him cultivated and leveled up. Gustavus, another good sub general with those minus 10% range defense and minus 10% siege defense skills. So he'll be staying on a sub again, which is why he's worked on. Jamong, another monster killer, so his skill doesn't carry across, so he won't be staying on a sub, but his power is just a nice addition. Nero, this is my second Nero, so I should have two. The next one should be Nero as well. Yep. So you can see this one here is quite high power. I've worked on him, so he's staying as a sub general. This one here I just threw on there because I didn't have any generals to put on there. What you'll notice is that his skill doesn't stack. So because I've got two Neros, you may think that you get minus 20% enemy HP, but you don't. Each general skill only applies once, so there's no point in having multiple generals of the same type on subsidies. He was just there as a filler. Other General Nero which I've spoken about, and that should be the last of them, I think. Yep. I was going to say something I've forgotten. I'm sure it'll come back to me. Defender. So this is the person I attacked. You can see his defense general here, fairly low power. Archer towers, level 23, so we saw that on the report. There was one of them, still survived, and it killed 891 troops. So compared to the 300,000 odd that I sent, it's not a very big amount that they killed. I can see here his troops, so these are his levels, so he's got level 6s, 7s, so some 8s there, some 9s, 10s, more 9s, so he's got a fairly mixed batch there. One thing I have noticed, and you can try that yourself on the world boss, if you attack with a full attack of the same tiered troops, say if you attack with a full T10 army on the world boss, you'll find that you'll get a damage report. If you do the exact same attack, so same number of troops, but mix T11 and Tier 10 troops, you'll find that you'll actually get less damage. So for some reason, when you mix tier types, you deal less damage. I'm not sure why, I'm not sure how it works. I would have thought that mixing 11s with 10s would give you a higher damage output, but for some reason the game gives it a lower damage output when you mix the tier types. So a full Tier 10 attack is better than a mixed Tier 10-11 attack. I do know that troop layering in this game doesn't work, so having various tiers and defense doesn't work. It doesn't make any difference to so that they don't act as meat shields, is what I'm trying to say. But your higher tier troops do get preference going to hospital. So your 10s and your 9s will go to hospital before your 1s and your 2s. One thing I haven't tested is because of that difference in the tiers in attacking, if that helps in defense or not. So if you have different tiers defending, if that weakens your defense, I'm not 100% sure on that. I'll try and do some testing on that to see if we can figure it out. But yeah, definitely an attacking with a full single tier army, even if it's a lower tier, is much better than attacking with a mixed higher tier army. If we look down past his troops, we can see his traps. So this is what I was saying about traps not being that effective. You can see 1,000 traps. He lost 125 and they killed 17 troops. He's got 10,000 here, or he had 11,200 or so. 1,000 died and they killed 283. So while they're not hugely effective, they do still score kills, and they are worth having, especially during things like undead. You do lose a lot once your tech's up. You lose a lot less, and they do more damage, and they are quite worthwhile. But again, I wouldn't bother mixing tiers with traps. It's the highest tier, or it's nothing. So we can see his subsidies here now as well. He's got Spartacus on a subsidy. Spartacus skill doesn't carry across anywhere from a sub, so he's just putting him on there for the power. So that extra 126k would have added into his subsidy power. And again, you can see his troops here, same as myself. He hasn't cleared them out, so I've actually done a bit of a favour here and killed off all his lower level subsidy troops, which means that when they reproduce, they'll be only be producing the highest tier they can. Another general here. This is probably a green or a blue general. Not great power, but not all of us can afford to have the best generals out there. So once worked on, this general will be okay in a sub. And you can see here he's got level 4 troops, which means that he has either been clearing out his previous troops, or he's been attacked before and had them wiped out. Again, Buffalo Bill, probably a blue general. 53k, 54. You'll find that, this is what I was going to say earlier, the best way to level up generals is to throw them on subsidies. If you want to get a batch of generals leveled up, throw them on your subsidies and go out and attack people, because the amount of troops you kill add experience to the generals, even on subs. So if you want to level up generals quickly, the best way to do it is throw them on subsidies and go out and do some attacks. So all these generals on his subsidies are earning experience. So they would have earned experience from this attack equal to the amount of troops that they killed when I attacked him. We'll have a look at that just to explain a bit better later as well. Another general, green, again, either a green or a blue probably. And Attila is a purple, so he says higher power there. Worked on a little bit. I'm not sure. I haven't spoken to this player much. I don't know who they are or what they're like. But he's got a pretty decent setup so far with his generals. So for a player of his size, this is last subsidy there. Player of his size, 12 mil power, will be a casual spender. So he's doing a pretty decent job. I didn't want to attack players much smaller than myself. I do like a good fair fight, but the alliance is in as being a bit of a pain on the server. Sorry, should have said that. Being a bit of a pain on the server, which means that they sort of opened themselves up to attack. And then this player was also attacking a hive at the time, so I sort of jumped in and got him to stop. So that's how reports go. Pretty basic. As far as general experience goes, so his generals would have gained 412k experience from that attack, and my generals would have gained 5.3 million experience from the attack. So you can see, attacking people is a good way to get general experience up. So some of mine would have gained some nice levels from that attack. And I think that's about it for reports. So yeah, thank you.